The Chasm and the Collision by Robert Alessar. Copyright 2017 by Robert Alessar. All rights reserved. Any reproduction of this copyrighted material by any means without the express written consent of the author is strictly prohibited. For Jacob and Kira, all the way. Chapter 6. Discussion and Encounter. When Alex's alarm clock went off in the morning, he had a long moment of disorientation. He could tell that he hadn't slept enough. As he shut off the noise, he saw that his clock had gone off 20 minutes earlier than usual. He stared dumbly at the red numbers for several seconds before remembering that he had set the alarm back because he was going to meet Simon and Megan that morning, and he wanted to head out early. He also vaguely remembered his plan to bring along his baseball bat on the morning walk. It took him a minute or so longer to remember his encounter with Petrie, but once he did, he recognized the real reason behind his grogginess, and he abruptly came wide awake. As he sat up and rubbed the sleep from his eyes, his gaze fell on the soles of his sock-clad feet. They were slightly stained with reddish-brown earth. That, at least, was firm evidence that his experience last night had been real and not a dream or hallucination. Unless, of course, he was now also hallucinating the dirt on the bottom of his socks. That seemed wildly unlikely, and even if he had been sleepwalking and had wandered outside, there simply wasn't any dirt that color anywhere in his neighborhood. He'd probably have grass stains, not dirt, on his socks if he'd strolled around anywhere near his house. He more firmly concluded that what had happened last night must have been real. He got ready for school quickly, even though he'd already gotten up earlier than usual. While he brushed his teeth, he inspected his forehead in the bathroom mirror. It bore a small horizontal bruise, very slightly raised from the surrounding skin, but nothing worse. When he touched the spot, it was tender, but not enough to make him wince. Soon he went downstairs, and before he made a move to get breakfast, he said to his mother, "I'm going to run the garbage out now, okay?" "Sure, Alex," she said. Then she looked at his bruise and asked, "How's your head, sweetie?" "It's fine," Alex told her. "No big deal." Alex's father, who was just then heading toward the kitchen, chuckled and commented, "It's a good thing that the Hinton men are notoriously hard-headed." His mother smirked, and Alex laughed. He guessed that his mother must have told his father all about his sleepwalking adventures of the previous night. Alex could only imagine what his parents would have thought if he'd tried to tell them what had really happened. They certainly wouldn't be making light-hearted jokes. More likely they'd be making Alex an appointment with a doctor. Unless, of course, he demonstrated the effects of the shunt to them. That thought drew Alex's gaze to the dining room wall, where the curtain hung innocently, hiding an astounding phenomenon behind its mundane material. He wondered what would have happened had the portal occurred 2 feet over from where it was, where it wouldn't be hidden by the drapes. Would his parents have noticed it? How could they not have? What would their reaction have been to an apparent space warp in the wall of their house? Shaking such speculations from his mind, Alex headed to and through the back door, walking down the steps and then to the garage. It was not usually kept locked, and he was big enough to open it easily by himself, a fact that pleased his father greatly. It allowed Alex to be entrusted with at least some of the typical masculine household chores, such as taking out the garbage and mowing the lawn. Alex didn't mind doing such work, but he did occasionally grumble about it. Today he was only too happy to have a good reason to go into the garage. The garbage cans were along the left wall inside the door, and so was most of Alex's outdoor sports gear. His aluminum baseball bat, however, was about halfway to the back of the garage. He went in and grabbed it, then tucked it into the garbage beside the bags. Alex tilted the can onto its wheels and rolled it out of the garage and down the street, stopping to close the garage door behind him. He carefully skirted his parents' cars. Neither of them had used the garage last night, and as he came level with the front of the house, he stopped and took the bat out of the can. He walked quickly to the low front stoop and laid the bat alongside it, where the shrubbery below the living room window hid it from casual observation. Then he went back to the garbage can and rolled it the rest of the way to the street. After leaving the garbage, Alex turned and was about to head back to the rear of the house, but he was distracted. Not far from the driveway, in the grassy berm in front of the house, grew a beautiful maple tree, which was responsible for most of the leaf buds that Alex had had to rake that week. He had always liked that tree. It was bigger than most of the others on the block, and its bark had interesting shapes and textures. Its branches were too high to make it a good climbing tree, at least for humans, but there were always patrols of big black ants, invisible from more than a foot or two away, strolling up and down its rugged surface. In the autumn, the tree's leaves turned a brilliant reddish-orange before falling. Alex walked up to the tree, thinking of the plants in Petrie's world, the vegetation in the clearing, and especially Winnestreth, the tree in the center of the garden. He wondered why those plants could think and even communicate, however strange that method of communication might be, while even such beautiful and wonderful trees as this one in front of his house were silent and, as far as he knew, unthinking. "Morning," Alex said quietly to the tree, feeling a little bit foolish but unable to resist the impulse. Of course, he received no response. He looked up and down the street and saw one or two other people taking out their garbage and doing other morning tasks, but he otherwise marked no significant activity. There were no strangely garbed men or dinosaur dogs in evidence. He had not really expected them, though he didn't know why. He took a step closer to the big maple tree and laid his hand on its bark, something he had done countless times before. The rough texture was familiar to him. He'd always had the notion that, if only his grip were a little stronger, he could have climbed the side of the tree just by holding onto its surface without the need for any branches to grab. The thought was enticing, frustrating, and amusing all at the same time, and he had, once or twice, tried to make such an ascent with no success whatsoever. As he touched the tree now, Alex was distracted from his dreams of impossible climbing feats. He thought, just maybe, that he felt something. Something faint and unclear, but there nevertheless in the heart of the tree. He put his other hand on the tree and closed his eyes to shut out the distraction of the street around him. He listened, if that was the right word, to the tree beneath his hands. He found that he could just barely get a sense of its life, its vital power, something he had never felt before. He supposed it had always been there, and he wondered why he had never noticed it in the past. Then again, it was very diffuse, very faint, and very distant, and there was no sign of awareness, of consciousness. But was it that there was no mind at all, or was it just far away, buried, asleep? "Hey," he said out loud, still not opening his eyes, "wake up already." As he said the words, he also, instinctively, tried to convey the same message through his touch into the tree. He still felt no response. Dropping his hands and opening his eyes, he laughed at himself briefly, but the laugh was rueful and sardonic. It seemed such a shame and somehow unfair that plants in Petrie's world could think and communicate, but here in the normal world they couldn't. He turned and walked back toward the rear of the house, feeling melancholy. Alex ate a bigger breakfast than usual that morning, but he ate it quickly. His mother and father both commented on his appetite and speed, warning him that he was going to choke if he didn't slow down. He told them that he was rushing because he was going to Simon's house before school, to go over homework nominally, and he wanted to have plenty of time. Neither of his parents seemed suspicious about his plans, and Alex felt guilty for misleading them, but at least his story wasn't all that far from the truth. He finished his breakfast and put his dishes in the dishwasher. His parents were still in the early stages of their own morning meals as he said goodbye to them and got his jacket and backpack on, then walked out the door, closing and locking it behind him. He stopped to pick up his baseball bat from its hiding place, leaning it casually over the same shoulder that bore his backpack. He glanced up at the front windows to make sure his parents didn't see him. They were both apparently still in the rear of the house, so his actions went unobserved. As he walked toward Simon's house, going in the opposite direction from the one he would have taken to school, Alex found that he still wasn't worried that he would encounter any dinosaur dogs, or the men who had been with them. He didn't know why he felt so confident, and he knew that he could be mistaken, but he simply had little apprehension. Simon's house was only about as far from Alex's house as Alex's was from the school, so it took less than 5 minutes for Alex to reach it. He was just about to walk up the front steps and open the door to the screened-in porch when the inner front door opened and Simon stepped out. Clearly, he had been watching for Alex's arrival. "Hey, Alex," he greeted, looking at Alex's right hand. "Good idea about the bat." Alex shrugged and replied, "Yeah, I thought it couldn't hurt. And I can bring it to school without getting into trouble, I think, as long as I put it in my locker." Simon nodded. He had closed the front door behind him and stepped through the screen door, letting it swing shut on its spring with a mild crash. Then he came down the steps to join Alex, and the two of them headed back to the sidewalk. Alex followed Simon's lead, which took them yet farther away from the school. As they walked, Alex pondered how to tell Simon what had happened to him the previous night. He decided that, instead of just launching into his bizarre tale, he would first find out if anything strange had happened to Simon. Simon was surreptitiously scanning the neighborhood, apparently keeping alert for any evidence of dinosaur dogs or other inexplicable phenomena. "So," Alex asked hesitantly, "how was your night?" Simon took a deep breath in, then, still not looking at Alex, he sighed and answered, "Well, actually, it was pretty normal. I didn't have any weird dreams. Not really weird, anyway." "What do you mean?" Alex asked. "Well, I had this kind of dream where I felt like I heard someone talking, like way far away, or maybe two people talking, or I don't know. It wasn't like a normal kind of talking. Anyway, I couldn't tell what they were saying, and it didn't last very long. I woke up when it stopped, but then I went right back to sleep. I didn't hear anything nor see anything after that." He glanced sideways at Alex, his face both apprehensive and embarrassed, as though he were sorry to bring such a boring report, and asked, "How about you?" Alex was silent for a moment, contemplating what Simon had just described. He wasn't certain, but he suspected that Simon had just told him of overhearing his own near-dream conversation with the tree, Winestreth. He was amazed. One astounding thing after another kept happening, and it was an ongoing struggle for him to process and internalize it all. From where had this ability, this connection, come? "Wow," he finally breathed. "I don't know where to start." Simon cocked an eyebrow at him and asked, "What do you mean?" "Well, okay, first of all, I think I can tell you who was talking in your dream last night." "Huh?" Simon said, briefly averting his gaze from the vigil of their surroundings. He had immediate cause to regret this shift in attention when he tripped over an uneven spot on the sidewalk and stumbled a few paces before catching his balance. "Are you okay?" Alex asked, once Simon had recovered. Yeah, Simon assured him. "What do you mean you could tell me who was talking in my dream? How can you tell me?" "Because I was one of the people talking," Alex replied. "Huh?" Simon said, obviously confused. Alex tried to explain as briefly as possible how he had found himself floating in blackness and had heard or felt the other mind speaking to him. He gave the rough gist of what it had said, though he didn't get into the meaning or the fact that it had directed him downstairs in his own house. Simon was clearly puzzled by Alex's short tale, and he asked, "So, I mean, this voice was telling you to go and help calm somebody who was upset?" "Yeah, kinda," Alex affirmed. "But who?" Simon asked. "And why? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. You really think your dream was what I heard in my dream?" "Well, mine wasn't really a dream," Alex said. "Not all the way, anyway. I was kind of awake, but like hypnotized or something. I knew what was going on, and I could answer back and ask questions and everything." "But what does it have to do with our other dreams?" Simon asked. "And why would it be... why would I be able to hear it?" "I don't know why you could hear it," Alex admitted, "but it definitely had to do with our other dreams. I'm completely sure about that." "Why?" Simon asked, looking still more puzzled. "Well," Alex began, but before he got into his explanation, he asked, "Well, first, how close are we to Megan's house?" They had been walking for about 2 blocks since leaving Simon's, having turned right at the first corner and then left at the next. "About a block away," Simon said. "Okay, well, let's wait until Megan's with us," Alex proposed. "I don't want to have to say everything twice over." "Everything?" Simon pounced on the word. "Did something happen besides your dream or hypnosis or whatever?" "Oh, yeah," Alex told him. "A lot more." "Really?" Simon asked. "Like what?" Well, like I said, let's wait until we get to Megan's." Simon seemed almost literally to need to bite his tongue to keep from pestering Alex. He eventually pursed his lips and acquiesced, saying, "Okay, fine. Anyway, it looks like she was waiting for us." He pointed down the street. Alex looked ahead and saw Megan, well down the block, coming out of a house on a low rise. Like Simon, she had obviously been watching through her window for the boys' approach. After closing her front door, she walked quickly down the sidewalk to meet them. She glanced left and right several times, checking, Alex assumed, for any sign of dinosaur dogs or other strange creatures, and then after a last glance at her house, caught up with the two boys. "Hey, Simon. Hey, Alex," she greeted. "Hi, Megan," Alex responded with a smile, happy to see her and to know, finally, exactly where she lived, though he would have liked a closer look. He supposed she had come out before they reached her house to avoid being seen meeting them, which was probably wise. After all, a mother who freaked out about her daughter arriving home even slightly late might also freak out to see her daughter meeting two boys to walk to school, even if one of them was someone she knew well. Simon also said hi to Megan, though he was rather curt about it. Then, turning to Alex, he said, "Okay, so Megan's here. Tell me what else you dreamed about." The trio had turned around and was now heading back in the direction from which the two boys had come. "First of all, I wasn't talking about dreaming," Alex said. "But before that, Megan, did you have any dreams last night?" During the brief exchange, Megan had watched Alex and Simon with a look of intense curiosity, and she sounded rather distracted when she answered, "Not really." Guessing that she wasn't being completely honest, Alex asked her, "Did you have a dream where you thought you heard two people talking or something?" Megan's eyebrows rose. "Well, yeah, kinda," she replied. "I didn't really think much about it." "Why, did you guys dream about the same thing?" "Well, Simon did," Alex replied, well, actually, I was one of the people who was talking." Megan's brow furrowed deeply, and she asked, "What do you mean?" "Well, like I was telling Simon, I was kind of half sleeping last night when someone just started talking to me. I couldn't see anyone or anything. It was all just black, you know? But I could sort of feel this person thinking at me." He proceeded to relate the bare bones of his brief conversation with Winestreth, much as he had to Simon. Only this time he revealed that the name of the person he was asked to reassure was Petrie, and that the non-voice had told him that Petrie was downstairs. "What?" Simon shouted. "This voice was telling you someone was in your house?" "Yep," Alex replied. "Were they?" Megan asked. "Oh, yeah," Alex assured her. You didn't actually go down the stairs, did you?" Simon stammered. "Sure I did," Alex said. "I could tell from what the voice said that there wasn't anything to worry about. And there wasn't. Not really, anyway." "You're crazy," Simon declared, but his tone was more admiring than admonishing. "I don't know," Alex responded. "I don't think so. I really was pretty sure it was safe. See, when the tree talked to me, I could tell it was telling the truth, because I could feel its thoughts, you know? And it said, wait a minute, time out," Simon interrupted, actually making a T sign with his hands. "Did you just say, when the tree talked to me?" Alex glanced quickly at Megan to see if she was reacting as Simon had, but she just had a look of eager interest. "Yeah," Alex said. "I didn't realize it just then, but afterwards I figured out that the voice talking to me was that tree from the garden in our second dream. You remember I said that when I went up to it I kind of said hello?" Yeah, I think so," Simon replied. "Well, it kind of said hello back in the dream the other night, and it was the same voice, or whatever you call it, that talked to me last night. I mean, it took a little while for me to figure out that's who it was, but once I was talking to Petrie, it was obvious." Wait, Simon interrupted again. "That doesn't make sense. Trees can't talk." "Neither can lizards," Megan interjected, "but those dinosaur dogs were talking yesterday, and we all heard them." "Now let Alex talk. I want to hear more about this. Like, who is Petrie?" Alex felt a surge of triumph to have Megan stick up for him, so he was quite enthusiastic as he replied, "Oh, Petrie's this girl who I guess she used to work in that garden and help take care of the tree, Winestreth." "When what?" Simon asked, evidently unable to contain himself for long, despite Megan's request. "Huh?" Alex asked. "You said when something," Simon said. "I did?" Alex wondered aloud. "Yes," Simon asserted, clearly exasperated. "You said that this Petrie worked in the garden to help take care of the tree when something." "Oh," Alex exclaimed, delight finally dawning. "Not when something. Winestreth. That's the tree's name." Simon was silent and stared at Alex for a few seconds as they walked, and Alex was worried that, though they were moving at a slow pace, Simon was going to trip again. He didn't, but just asked in a skeptical voice, "You mean that this tree that supposedly talked to you has a name?" "Well, I don't know if that's what it calls itself," Alex replied, rather irritated. "I just know that's what Petrie called it." "Anyway," Megan interrupted, once again sounding ever so slightly exasperated, "tell us what happened. We could figure out all the other stuff later. Obviously you went out and talked to Petrie like the voice asked you to, right?" "Yeah," Alex answered, grateful for the intervention and her attention. "And the tree was right. She was freaking out. When I first saw her, she was just standing there in the dining room, holding her head in her hands like she was going to explode or something." "She was standing in your dining room?" Simon asked, horrified. "Yep," Alex told him. But how?" Simon asked in response. "How did she get in your house? Didn't your parents hear?" Well, actually, after a minute or two, I guess my mom must have heard us talking, because I heard her get out of bed, and Petrie heard her too. So she took me to where she came from, and it was kind of obvious then how she got into the house." He watched Simon carefully out of the corner of his eye, waiting for his reaction to what Alex was sure was the clear answer to how Petrie had gotten into the Hintons' dining room. Simon, however, simply looked baffled. Instead, it was Megan who took the next logical step. "You went through it, didn't you?" she asked, though it was more of a statement than a question. Alex looked at her and saw that her eyes were wide with wonder. "You went through that thing in the wall, behind the curtains." Glancing at Simon, Alex could see him recognizing the truth of what Megan had said, but his look was one of mingled surprise and horror. "You didn't, did you?" he asked. "Well, yeah," Alex replied, "I did. My mom was about to come downstairs and find us, and Petrie just kind of grabbed my arm and took me through." Simon looked too stunned for words, but Megan's curiosity and amazement were evident as she asked, "What was on the other side? And what was going through like?" Ridiculously pleased to have Megan look at him as she was, Alex said, "Going through was like nothing, really. I couldn't even feel it, except it kind of tugged on my pajamas a little. Oh, and on the other side of the shunt, that's what Petrie called it, it was tilted, so I almost lost my balance when I went through. But otherwise, it was just like being in my dining room 1 second and walking into the other place right after." Simon finally found his voice after a very brief interval of stunned silence and stammered, What was the other place?" Checking first to make sure that Simon didn't look like he was about to faint, which he didn't, Alex said, "It was the place we saw in our dreams for the last few nights." Megan gasped, then asked, "Do you mean the place I drew, or the garden?" "Well, it wasn't either of those places," Alex answered. "It was this, woods by this hill. But from what Petrie said, those things were both there too, but a long way away. She used to work in the garden where the tree is. I don't remember what she said the name of the garden was, or the name of the city thing, but she knew about them and about that chasm, she called it. That's the right word, isn't it, Simon?" Simon, whose mouth was hanging open slightly, nodded and said, "If you mean that big cliff, then yeah." "Yeah," Alex affirmed. "So anyway, I was in this clearing in the woods, and Petrie told me some stuff. Well, first I had to kind of calm her down a lot. She was already freaking out, and when I told her we'd eaten those berries, she fell flat on her butt." "What?" Simon said. "The berries?" Megan asked. "You mean the ones from the other day, right?" "Yeah," Alex replied. "From what she said, those berries came from Winnestrith, the tree, and she took them and ran away, but some people were after her, so she went through that shunt into my dining room, and she put the berries into the fruit bowl." A memory stirred, and Alex turned to Simon with a rueful smile and said, "So I guess the prowler really did put the berries in my house, huh?" Simon just shook his head. He didn't look pale and unsteady, but he was clearly battling with skepticism. Alex suspected that if Simon hadn't seen the dinosaur dogs with his own eyes and heard them as well, he wouldn't have believed a word of what Alex was saying. Megan, however, still looked enthralled, a fact which Alex found reassuring, and not merely because of the crush he had on her. It was hard enough just to have experienced what he had the night before. If no one had believed him, he would have felt far worse. It occurred to him that neither he nor his two friends were worrying much about the possibility of running into the men and dinosaur dogs from the day before. Megan was wearing sneakers, in case she needed to run again, presumably, but she was no longer even glancing at her surroundings, though the three had passed Simon's house now and would soon be back on Alex's block. That would bring them near the place where they had encountered the impossible procession. Compared to what he had experienced overnight, though, Alex thought even that bizarre group seemed relatively prosaic. He carried his baseball bat casually, as if he were just on his way to a weekend game with friends, not protecting himself, Simon, and Megan from any possible reptilian attackers. "Why did she take them?" Megan asked abruptly, and Alex had to think back for a moment to figure out what she meant. "You mean the berries?" he asked. "Why did Petrie take the berries?" "Yeah," she confirmed. Alex shrugged and replied, "I don't know. I don't think she even really knows. From what I could get, the tree, Winestreth, just asked her to do it, so she did. I think she said that it told her that someone was going to do something bad with them or something." "Huh?" Simon grunted. "With berries? What could someone do with berries apart from eating them? Which we did anyway." "Dude, I don't know," Alex admitted. "And I don't think Petrie did either. She seems almost as lost about all this as we are. I mean, I had to calm her down, you know? She was about to just lose it even before we heard that manta ray thing coming." "What?" Simon yelled. "You heard that thing again?" "Yeah," Alex said with a nod, wishing Simon would keep it down a bit. "I heard it while I was over there in the clearing. Petrie seemed to know what it was, and she didn't want it to find us. So she kind of pushed me back through to my dining room and said she was going to hide. She said that plants had helped protect her." After a moment he added, "I hope she's all right." "Wait," Simon said again. "She said the plants would help protect her?" "Yes," Alex replied, a trifle irritated at constantly having to repeat himself. "And I'll bet they could, because, when I got there, I realized that, all the plants were kind of alive. Well, I mean, I guess all plants are alive. I mean, they kind of all said hello to me." "They talked?" Simon asked, one eyebrow raised and bearing an expression of mingled confusion, amazement, and disbelief. Alex guessed that Simon was probably thinking that one of them was crazy and that it was probably Alex. "Well, they didn't talk, not out loud," Alex said, trying to be patient with his friend's doubt. "It was like I could feel it, like they were thinking at me, just like Winestreth. Petrie could feel it too, but she was pretty surprised that I could. In fact, she was surprised that I could see her." "Really?" Megan asked with sudden intensity. "Yeah," Alex said. "When I first talked to her in the dining room, she was amazed that I knew she was there. She seemed even more surprised by the fact that I knew her name." He saw Simon's brow furrow and his mouth start to open, so he headed off the expected question by saying, "I knew her name because the tree told me." Simon shook his head impatiently. "I wasn't going to ask about that. You told us that already. I was going to ask if she told you that other people hadn't been able to see her." Alex, embarrassed to have been so incorrectly presumptuous with his friend, replied, "No, she didn't say. I don't know if she'd been anywhere but my dining room, but she obviously didn't expect me to be able to see her." "It's like those guys yesterday and the dinosaur dogs," Megan commented. "No one else could see them. Or the flying thing. No one else heard it but you guys." "But this Petrie heard the manta ray thing in that other place last night, right?" Simon asked. "Oh yeah," Alex confirmed. "I didn't see it this time, but that was because I got the heck out of there. It was bad enough seeing it go over my house from inside. I didn't want to have it find me outside in the daylight." "Wait," Megan said. "It was daylight there?" Alex nodded. "Yeah, it was. I mean, the sky was still that reddish color like in the dreams, but it was daytime." "That's not too weird," Simon said. "It's still daytime in other places on Earth when it's nighttime here. If he went to some other planet... But wait, Alex, what did Petrie look like? Was she an alien or something?" "Huh?" Alex said with great surprise. "No, she was a normal-looking girl. Maybe 16 or 17 years old. I mean, she was a mess. She looked like she hadn't had a chance to put on clean clothes for a while, but she was human." "So were the guys we saw yesterday," Megan noted, "apart from the dinosaur dogs. Why, shouldn't they be?" "Well, no, they shouldn't," Simon replied. "If that thing in Alex's wall goes to another planet, And it's got to. I mean, if the sky is different. Well, I mean, I've read that things from other planets should look completely different from anything here on Earth. I mean, you shouldn't even have been able to breathe there, and for them to be able to speak English? It's crazy. Oh, said Alex, recognizing that Simon's words made sense. Yeah, Petrie was surprised by that too. Only she said she wasn't speaking English. Huh? Simon said, once again, and both he and Megan looked utterly nonplussed. Yeah, Alex said. She said she was talking in her normal language. I don't remember what she called it. But she could understand me and I could understand her, just like we were both speaking English. That's weird, Megan observed. Yeah, it is, Alex agreed. Simon said nothing for the moment, but he drew to a halt and looked at their surroundings. Alex and Megan stopped as well. Alex realized that they had already passed his house and were now approaching the last intersection before the school. He was amazed by how quickly their trip had passed, though they had walked slowly. Simon pulled back his jacket sleeve and looked at his watch. We still got like 25 minutes before school starts, he said. Do you guys want to go around the block or something so we can keep on talking? I don't know, Megan said. What about the dinosaur dogs? Maybe we could just talk in front of the school. We can't while I've got this, Alex countered, lifting his baseball bat off his shoulder. They'll think I'm waiting to beat someone up or something. Megan looked mildly distressed, and her reaction made Alex half regret his decision to bring the bat. Yeah, Simon agreed with Alex. Plus, I really don't want to talk about this stuff where anyone else could hear us. Megan sighed. Yeah, I guess that's a good point, she admitted. Well, we are pretty close to the school. I don't think... Pardon me, a new voice interrupted, startling all three of them. They turned and saw a man approaching the sidewalk. He was black, of modest height, with close-cropped hair and a strong build. He wore a bright blue button-up shirt, black pants, and what looked like high-end boots. He seemed somewhat stiff and nervous. Hi, Alex said. Megan and Simon both regarded the man with distracted expressions. Neither of them said anything. Hi, the man replied, looking mildly surprised. You three live in this area, don't you? He seemed almost as though he didn't really expect them to answer. Alex thought there was something slightly odd about the man's clothes, as well as his demeanor, but he couldn't quite put a finger on what it was. The color of his shirt was a bit unusual for workwear, but Alex had seen stranger. In response to the man's hesitant question, Alex replied, Yeah, sure. Simon gave him a dirty look, presumably wanting to berate him for giving out such information to a stranger. Alex didn't see what harm that bit of data could do. It was obvious that if someone was headed for the middle school, and on foot at that, they must live nearby. Alex suspected that Simon had just never quite gotten past his childhood fear of strangers. But they were near the school, and Alex had his baseball bat. There couldn't be much danger in talking to a solitary man who looked lost. The stranger continued to look vaguely unsure and surprised as he went on, Well, I'm not from this area, but I'm trying to find a friend of mine who's staying around here. I was wondering if you had seen her. Simon's brow wrinkled and he asked, Well, do you know the address where she's staying? His tone made it clear that he thought the man must not be very bright and that he was annoying. No, the man admitted, and Alex thought he seemed both puzzled by the question and rather perturbed by Simon's attitude. But I could describe her for you. Well, Simon began, even more clearly impatient. He was interrupted by Megan. Why are you wearing a woman's shirt? She asked the stranger, sounding more than idly curious. Apparently she too had noticed something odd about the man's clothing, though Alex couldn't say how she had concluded that his shirt was a woman's. The owner of the shirt in question gaped blankly in response to Megan's query. He looked down at his shirt, then back up at Megan, and asked, Excuse me? What do you mean a woman's shirt? This is my shirt. He looked easily as confused as Simon had looked moments before, and almost as irritated. But the buttons are wrong, Megan asserted, and once again Alex thought that her comment and her demeanor was more than idly curious. Simon looked at Megan with surprise and confusion. The stranger was also clearly perplexed. What do you mean? He asked again. Men's shirt's button left over right, Megan explained. Your shirt button's right over... Her voice trailed off. Her eyes left the man's shirt and went to his face, widening in alarm as she said, "Oh my God! It's him, the guy from yesterday, the one with the dinosaur dogs." "What?" Simon asked. He didn't seem to grasp at all what Megan was saying. Alex, however, made the connection as soon as Megan revealed it. The man before them was the very one who had been leading the group they had seen on the way home from school the day before. "Holy crap," he said out loud. "You're right. It's the one that dinosaur dog called Boss." The stranger's expression darkened, while at the same time Simon's face showed dawning recognition, which rapidly evolved into open fear. Even as Simon took an involuntary step backward, the man looked over Simon's shoulder and said, "You see what you've done?" "Sorry," said a voice from behind the three middle schoolers. Alex whirled around, and Megan and Simon did the same. To his astonishment and fear, he saw that, during the few moments in which their attention had been focused on the man, several more individuals had arrived and all but surrounded the three students from behind, cutting them off from their approach to the school. This was a bigger group than the one they had seen yesterday. There were 3 men among them, the redhead from the day before and 2 others. All 3 wore blue, gold-belted tunics. With them were 3 dinosaur dogs. Alex was fairly sure that the one closest to Simon, who wore a chagrined expression, must have been one of the ones from yesterday. "Oh, crap," Simon whispered, his face going pale. At the same time, the man who had spoken to the 3 friends went on, "Now even the people here, who shouldn't be able to understand or even see us, know that you call me Boss." The dinosaur dog with the chastened look said, I know, I'm sorry. I forgot." "You forgot," the first man said sardonically. "You forgot. You could remember the smell of every plant and animal you've ever encountered since the day you were hatched, but you forgot that I don't like you to call me Boss." Simon whispered, "Oh, crap," again, and Alex saw that his face was paler than it had been at its worst the day before. Megan also looked frightened, and Alex was more than a little scared himself, but Simon looked frankly ill. His sickly pallor wasn't helped by the fact that the people and reptiles who had come up from behind were now drawing in closer. The ones farthest out to the sides edged forward to cut off potential escape routes on the left and right. Some walked in the yard of one of the last houses before the school grounds, while others walked in the street. The apologetic dinosaur dog had not moved. He hung his head in apparent honest repentance and said, "I'm really sorry, but Freeman." Alex decided that he had to do something before the situation got out of hand. He had no idea if these people and lizards were dangerous or not. The leader and the dinosaur dog he was reprimanding seemed far too casual to have sinister purposes, but that could have been an act. In any case, there were a lot of them, and they had Alex and his friends surrounded. Also, unlike Petrie, this bunch did not seem harried or in over their heads. Brandishing his bat and trying to sound more confident than he felt, Alex said, "Hey, don't come any closer. If anyone gets any closer, I'm going to bust your head open." He didn't know how seriously they would take his threat, but he meant to carry it out if necessary. Looking down at Alex, the first man held up a hand and said, "Now take it easy. We don't mean you any harm." "Then you shouldn't mind," Alex began. Before he could get any further, however, he heard a sharp, crackling sound and felt a shock in his hands. The bat was wrenched from his grip and flew several feet to land in the nearby yard. Alex turned and saw that one of the men behind him, one who hadn't been there the day before, held a device in his right hand that looked a bit like a metal facsimile of an ice cream cone. It had a round top flecked with numerous clear gems and a metal cylinder below, held in the man's fist. "Hey," yelled the original speaker, the one the dinosaur dog had accidentally referred to as Boss. "I didn't—" He was interrupted by Megan suddenly screaming at the top of her lungs. "Help! Somebody help us! Child molesters! Terrorists!" Alex hadn't really been paying attention to whether there were any normal people nearby, but Megan's shouts were penetrating enough to be heard in some of the nearby homes and possibly even in the school. A panicked look leapt onto the faces of some of the surrounding men and lizards. Alex had a moment of hope, as well as of admiration for Megan's tactic, which was probably going to be much more effective than his own. He heard the leader, to whom his back was now turned, saying, Wait now, just a minute!" Then he saw a strange light flash from the gems on the spherical top of the metal ice cream cone in the new man's hand, and he felt another much stronger shock, this one running through his entire body. Then he saw only darkness.